Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Sweet. What up, Anderson Ranch? Woo. Cool. So my name's Teddy, and I'm the coordinator for sculpture. And it gives me great pleasure to be introducing Lan Tuazon and Vitus Shell this evening. So can we give it up for them? Cool. So before we begin, can we please take a moment just to silence your cell phones? Thank you. Looks like we got some people coming in. And at this time, I'd like to acknowledge that our campus resides on the traditional ancestral territory of the Ute people, who called this Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures and a question and answer about 10 minutes after the 2 lectures. So first up is Lan Tuazon. Lan lives and works in Chicago, where she is an associate professor of sculpture at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Lan is exhibited internationally at the New Gallery in the Imperial Palace of Austria, Bucharest Biennale 4, the WKV Kunstverein in Germany, the Lowry Museum in London. Solo exhibitions of her work includes Brooklyn Museum and the Storefront of Art and Architecture in New York, Young World Inc. in Detroit, Julius Caesar in Chicago, and the Visual Arts Center in Texas. She was awarded artist-in-residence and fellowships at the Akademie Schloss Solitude, Headlands Art Center, and the Civitella Ranieri in Italy, and Hyde Park Art Center in Chicago. She is participating in the Pacific Standard Time exhibition at the Hammer and is the recipient of the Rome Prize, funded by the Terra Foundation for 2024. What does this say? She is also a certified badass. So, woo. Please give it up for Lan.
Man, that just sets me up to meet that. All right, guys, thank you all for being here. Thanks for sharing your time. And I'm having a really great time at Anderson Ranch. And I'm very happy to be here and share with you my work. But also, I just sort of want to take a little moment to reflect. I think we could have experiences in which we go from one art center to the next, but I just sort of want to remind you guys, when we get together in art centers, it's sort of like we're practicing utopia. And we're kind of building our own culture, and we're getting closer and closer as we practice towards that utopia. So it really is extremely meaningful to me, okay? All right, I'm gonna get going. Because there's so many of you, I can feel all of your heartbeats. My heart is racing. I'm getting a lot of life force. So I'm just gonna, ow! Woo! Wow, thanks for all that life, guys. I was gonna do a little dance too, but I don't think this is gonna rock it with the stage. Better not. What do I really wanna tell you today? I don't know. I've been working for almost like 25 years. I finished a 10-year trilogy. There's a series of work. It has changed. I've built a lot of things in metal. I can carve marble, and I've done a lot of things. I'd like to think that some of the work that I do is personal, but like Adrienne Piper, she says, my work is personal, but don't think for a second that it's autobiographical. It's not about me, it's about how you see me, how me fits in the world, how a person that is a whole galaxy can be cut up into small categories and stuff. And so I've been thinking about that. I'm coming to you live from Chicago. I've been there for 10 years. But before that, I was in New York City for 20 years. And before that, I was in the Philippines for 10 years. So in a way, I'm very aware of what it means to understand what it means to be in a place and how a place brings out a side of yourself because of the place that you're in. And so I don't think about like being a stable self. I don't know what this person is about and stuff. And so in a way, I'm gonna just let that thought stay in the air as a way to kind of let ambiguity and unknowingness kind of settle in. So I'm gonna show you a series of work that are more contemporary, more current. I'm not gonna go all the way back to older work. And in order for you to understand, well, I gotta tell you a story because basically the work I'm about to show you, it looks like I just reorganized your recycling bin. That's what it's gonna look like. And so in order for you to kind of help frame meaning, I'm gonna have to tell you this Filipino cosmology story of how Filipinos think about their relationship to the world. So in the Philippines, there are ritualistic practices that happen when a child is born. There's all these things that you have to do that are rituals, they're handed down, they have meaning. There are ways of foretelling the personality of your child. But the first thing that happens when a child is born is the doctor cuts up the umbilical cord and he takes it and then he folds it and puts it in a gauze and then hands it to the mother. The mother gets to keep it. And then it looks like a tea bag. And it's about the size of a tea bag. It's tiny. And she takes your umbilical cord and she hangs this umbilical cord in the corner of the room. So when your child is asleep, they see this umbilical cord to the room. And you have no idea what that is. But as you grow up, you start to look at it and you start to wonder, gee, I wonder what that tea bag is doing over there. And then you learn that it's your umbilical cord. And without anyone explaining it to you, you understand like this amazing moment of multiplicity that you're like, oh, I was in my mother's womb, and now I'm in this room. And this room is the extension of my mother's womb. And then you say, but this room is just one room in a house. And this house is just one house in a village. And then you keep going until you realize the multiple layers of spaces that have built you until you get to the point when you say, and all of that, country, like, you know, when you play that game of just like country, continent, you know, parts of the world, the planet, and then you get this like chain of spaces from your mother's womb to the planet. And this is how Filipinos connect mother to nature. And I think there's always something about this. And you know, when you're an artist and you make art, you actually, there are things you discover about yourself. And I noticed at some point, I was like, you onion, dude. Like, you keep putting things in things, and then they have things in them, and then they have more layers out. And I think it was this desire to kind of express this spatial onion relationship, to move it away from a person, and to kind of think about these interrelated spaces that kind of help us become who we are. And so, okay, there's that story. Now you can look at recycling. I wanted to kind of think about like what it means to kind of show this spatial thing. And so I said, let's put things in things. I said, okay, let's start out with a geode. Beyond the geode is a facial container. That's the facial lotion. I split it in half, and then it's kind of like cracked open like a geode. And I was like, that really does something. One, we're looking at plastics as if it's a kind of geological matter. And two, we're looking at cultural objects and commodities as if it's going through a natural process of time. And I was like, that's pretty neat. And I was like, yeah, it's really easy to make pretty art, you know? I can't do that. And I believe in negative aesthetics. And I thought, you know what would be really great is to try to find beauty in something so common as a plastic bottle. The plastic bottle is the most common and everyday thing. It's present under my nose now. I use it, and then when I'm done with it, I throw it away. And I never even think about it. It delivers the things that I need, sustenance, water, elemental things, and then I never say thank you to the bottle. So I started to wonder, like, hey, this is kind of like a figure. This is a body. So let me do this. Let me cut it in half and give it a lateral bisectional cut. And then I started layering it, and I was like, kind of like a way of thinking about sculpture in the fourth dimension of time, as if like layers, as if it was a tree, and it creates layers of time just like a tree, right? So this is why I started to layer them. Then I also started to see patterns of culture, and I was like, the containers that we kind of create are categorical. You can start to find sense in them. So that was the first one that you saw, and then I was like, look, liquid commodities. These are all the containers used to supply liquid commodities, from honey, oil, water, to vinegar, you name it. Again, they start to look like bodies. Somebody said they look like Matryoshka dolls. And anyway, they're called future fossils, as a way to think about this in far ahead into the future, when it becomes a kind of fossil of our times. It's an organized recycling bin, but I kind of think like it does something to you, you know? There are containers that show patterns that are in the resemblance of fruits. So there's a section and a category of false fruits. We have been doing this since the beginning of time, of creating containers out of fruits. And then from there, I started to think, man, this collection is getting big. Let's create a whole archive. And that archive is called No Nouns Are Left Whole. So this is a collection of false fruits, and then there are other categories. It took about 3 years to create this process, and I want you to know I didn't really know what this was. And I was like, God, it's gonna take so much theory to convince people that this is art, you know? It really is. And so I was like, well, let's just try to go through the process. The archive gets larger. This is the show that I presented at University of Texas, at the Visual Art Center in Texas. I cut everything from the smallest tiny bottle for soy sauce all the way to a larger container. And it's all materials, glass, tin, plastics. And then they kind of show their layers through their cuts this way. They're split open just like geodes to kind of beg for seeing them naturally. And then when the pieces kind of outgrow the space of the shelf, then they stand alone. So sometimes the titling will reflect what is inside them. The clam and the coconut. Then, of course, it's like, why stop there? It seems like we are really completely surrounded by containers. They are what make us possible. And so, for example, if you just isolate water as an element that is delivered, these are all water containers, and they get really big. And this was kind of like the largest container that I had built this far with the Visual Arts Center. And so I kind of like called my mom, and I just sort of wanted to double check, you know. I was like, Mom, I don't know if you know, but I go around the country and I tell them the story about the umbilical cord, and I just sort of like read that, you know, I lived it, then I read about it in a book, but I just sort of want to double check on a few things, right? And I was like, let me learn more. It's been really fruitful. And I said, you know, like, so I saw that you did the umbilical cord. It's still in our family home. And I was like, and what about the other stuff? Did you do the other stuff? Like if you have a child and they're born and you want them to be a writer, you get a coconut and you put a pencil in the coconut. And if you want them to be a writer or creative, you tear a page from a book, and that will leave an empty space for their creativity. If you want them to be happy, you write out the lyrics to a song, you put it in the coconut, right? And then you put the coconut together, and then if you want them to stay near home, you plant it right outside your home, but not too deep. You know, and that's a really big warning because, you know, you don't want to plant it too deep. But then if you want them to have a life of travel, you just send it down the river. And I was like, Mom, did you do that? And she goes, yeah, I got you. Why do you think you're the artist that you are? I got the pencil, I got a song, I got the book, I put the pedal. And she goes, but you know what, though? I'm really sorry. I think we planted it too deep, and it took you 3 years to start to speak. So sorry about that. We didn't mean to do that. That's what happens when you plant the coconut deep. And I was like, oh, I'm surprised. I thought it would have been like, because you sent it down the river. Because we ended up traveling all over the world. And she goes, no, girl. I put you on a pineapple dole can. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not authentic. You got to put it in a coconut. That's authentic. And she's like, no, we didn't have a coconut nearby, but a pineapple dole can had just been recently opened, and it was right there. And so we put the pencil in the paper and the song in the bed, and we put, she's like, and it went in the pineapple dole can. And I was like, Mom, I'm making art that's about containers, right? You're like really messing me up here. And she's like, Lan, don't do this. The coconut is part of this world, but so is the pineapple can. And then she goes, the pineapple can had finished delivering the pineapple to us. And then it did this job of kind of creating, it's metal, dude. That stuff lasts forever. And it did this job of like securing your creativity in your future. And so I kind of learned from my mom that I thought, that's right, because it gives me this first drink, then I throw it away. That actually, in a way, and then when we throw this away, it ends up in the oceans. It ruins ecologies. It ruins like whole areas, and it disrupts life systems. But if I were not going to send this away out of sight, and I brought it back to me, all I had to do was do the same thing that my mom did with this pineapple dole can. I had to figure out the next role this material was going to play. I had to let it transform. Because materials persist. And if you talk to sculptors, most of the stuff is about death. It really is. Because if you're a sculptor, you're talking about material. And material persists, it transforms. And the moment we name something, it's like we freeze it just for that one moment. Coconut, we freeze it. Pineapple dole can. We freeze it and it changes again. But most of the time, sculptors know that materials can transform and change all the time. So these names are just stages of a lifespan of an object. So how do we really think about that as a sculpture? And now I have to talk real fast because we got 7 minutes left. So the next future fossil piece that I made, this is I basically built a house, and it was cut in half. And one of the things that I decided to do was that my aesthetics was going to adopt a few ethics. I was going to make an artwork that had a whole cycle of ethical stances. One of the things I thought about was the circular economy. That whenever I was going to build a sculpture, it was going to be like the second life of an object, and that it was going to clean the environment, or it's going to use the materials, but at the end of the exhibition, it goes to another foundation, so they use it. And so here's what I did. I built a house. It's a single-family home. It does not have a roof, and the question had a test. So if each person in their lifetime produces 109 tons of waste, how much could we reabsorb in producing the needs for our life? So this building was kind of built with that premise, is that we would build it based on collected, diverted waste from the waste stream and then used. So this house is built with the 5 techniques of material invention. The one in front of you is designed by an architect. It is a bacteria-grown cement, and we use it as mosaic patio on the outside. The blue wall that you're seeing is a type of design that's called secondary design. First, it's a water container, and it delivers water, but when you're finished using it, it's a buildable brick. When you entered the exhibition, you had these material bays. The audience members knew that when you entered the exhibition, you were asked to donate plastics 2, 5, and 6. And then depending on how much the audience members donated those plastics, they were going to be shredded and pressed, and then also like used as the materials. So you would see the exhibition change throughout the lifespan of the exhibition. So that sheet pressed plastics were used as paneling. The other thing that I did was like, this is a newspaper wood. It's a type of reconfigured material, so they're wall paneling. And here's another view of the secondary use design water brick in blue. There are coffee shelving that were designed, was built. And so that was that piece. And that's where I am. One of the things that I'm working on right now is trying to think about like how to create a facility to produce my own materials. Usually we think about art making as meaning and making. We create an idea and then we go make it. And I just sort of want to like test you guys to kind of imagine what it means to move the beginning point a little earlier and to think about matter, meaning, and making as the process. So in this way, I needed to build a facility that collected plastics from the community. I shred it, and these panels that you see over there are what the sheet press plastics look like when you press them into panels. These machines are from a movement called the Precious Plastics Universe, and basically they encourage you to download the plans, build the machines, create a site in your community, and begin to collect these plastics and divert them from the waste stream. We do not believe that you should continue to participate in the production of plastics, but it is very important to think about how to process the stuff that is already built. So recycling is a lie that's constantly recycled. It takes way too much labor, way too much facilities to actually keep up at the rate that we're using and producing plastics. The only way to really attend to the problem is to actually refuse the use of these plastics, right? But still, in this middle point, we could handle the plastics that we have. Now, as you can tell, I organized the recycling bin. I don't make money from my art at all because I do that. So I needed to make some bread pieces. So here's for the daily bread. The new work that I've been doing is I've been creating paintings with quotes. I've been creating panel sculptures as a kind of consideration of a container. They are shredded plastics and plastics that are collected. They're highly formal, made out of plexiglass. And they kind of go from 80s arcade video game design, graphs and data charts. But one of the things I love about this is that, there's dust that sits in these, they're encased, and it's an artwork that's going to constantly change because they're not fixed. And in a way, it's kind of thinking about that the container that you can name is the largest world that you can kind of conceive of. But it's always important to kind of question that actually things are not separated at all. They're all part of an open world. So I'm going to stop it right there. Thanks, guys. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Lan. Next up, we have Vitus Shell. Vitus is a mixed media collage painter from Monroe, Louisiana, where he lives and works. His work is geared toward the Black experience, giving agency to people from this community through powerful images, deconstructing, sampling, and remixing identity, civil rights, and contemporary Black culture. He received a BFA from Memphis College of Art, 2000, and an MFA from the University of Mississippi in 2008. Vitus Shell has been in residence at Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts, Anderson Ranch Art Center, woo. Hermitage Artist Retreat, Mass MoCA, Joan Mitchell Center, Skowhegan School of Art, and Maser Museum of Art. To date, he has accumulated an impressive list of achievements, some of which include participating in exhibits at universities, museums, and private galleries across the country, including the McKenna Museum of African American Art, Stephen F. Austin University, Miami University, Oxford, OH. I don't know if that's Ohio or maybe it's just OH. Painted murals for the National Civil Rights Museum's NBA Pioneers exhibit, Indianola City Pool in Indianola, MS, Union Parish Elementary School in Farmerville, Louisiana, and being commissioned to do public art by the Memphis Urban Art Commission. Vitus Shell has received numerous grants, including the Joan Mitchell MFA Award. As of 2020, Vitus Shell is currently a visiting assistant professor at the Louisiana Tech University. Please welcome to the stage Vitus.
How y'all doing? Thank you for having me. I didn't get the badass part at the end, which I begged for it. I know I wrote that on that paper really big. But I got a hard act to follow. So my work has been about me trying to understand myself and understanding myself through community, through family stories, through friend stories, through history, and it's all the work that I've been doing is I'm starting to really come to the conclusion that it's really about me collaging things together, collaging stories together to understand history different, collaging community people together to create different communities, collaging just different things together just to create new futures. So I'm from Monroe, Louisiana, and Monroe is sits next to West Monroe. Monroe is 65% black. West Monroe is 65% white. And Monroe is really known by these people. And a part of what I work hard to do is fight this stereotype that controls how people perceive North Louisiana. And I'll get to how I'm fighting that at the end of the presentation. So in 1996, I decided to leave Monroe after graduating high school and go to Memphis College of Art. I applied for different schools, about 3 or 4 different schools, and I got into 2, Memphis College of Art and Savannah College of Art. Initially, I wanted to go to school just to an art school, and I wanted to stay in the South. I didn't want to stay at home because I got too many friends, and they would have been in my dorm room or in classrooms with me. So I decided not to do that. I got into Savannah, but my dad was the person that made me really concreted where I was going. He told me that if my car broke down, he wasn't gonna be able to help me get my car off the road. So I chose Memphis because Memphis was only 5 hours away. And Memphis was the better choice because of the culture and the people and the school. I learned a lot while I was there. I was an illustration major, but I tried a little bit of everything while I was there. I took a few sculpture classes, and I tell everybody, I'm not good at sculpture at all. Anything 3D, it's not my thing. So. Yeah, the teacher just kind of passed me in that class. So, but while I was there, this guy was the dean, Alonzo Davis, and Alonzo would walk past me every day in the hallway and just kind of smile. I never got a chance to really work with Alonzo. He's still living, so I want to make it like he's gone. But he would just smile, and then one day. He stopped me and he was like, "It's a lady that just moved back to Memphis. She's originally from here, but she lived in Oakland for a long time. And she also lived in Chicago, where she went to the Art Institute. And this lady was her name is Brenda Joy Smith, and she was looking for an assistant, somebody to help her with this figurine series that she was making. Basically drawing out the sketch, the scenes for the figurines so they could be made later. But my drawings were okay, and Brenda really liked doing everything herself, which was cool with me because she kept me around and she fed me. And everybody know, like in college, it's, looking for food. That's why you go to the art openings. So they would feed me all the time, and her and her husband kind of like taught me the business of being an artist and like the practice of being an artist of all that stuff. So I picked up a lot of things from her and her husband. While I was around Brenda and Robert, we were thinking about like Memphis being also another city that was 65%, 60 something. It's like 68. It's high percentage of black folks that were there, but the art scene not reflecting that. So we decided to get together as artists, and we started meeting at their gallery, and we started this artist collective, artist collective, and this was around 2000, right around the time I graduated from Memphis College of Art. So it was a perfect timing because I started to like really hone in on what I wanted to do. Me being an illustrator, it was kind of like a field that was kind of drying out. Not saying that it's not still work in the field, but it was a kind of hard field to kind of navigate. So I started to move over towards studio art, and having this group was perfect. It wasn't good. It was perfect because we could talk about personal things, and those personal things would eventually turn into art. So we would have shows about like religion, like how we all kind of had like different takes on it. So we would make work about that. So a little bit after that, I started really thinking about like the work I was making. This is my grandmother, and my grandmother would tell like these. I always describe my grandmother as Oprah Winfrey in The Color Purple. She was real, just funny and fun and feisty and everything. But she would tell like these stories about like just like how she just never, I guess, fit into like just like what that ideal of what being a woman or a black woman in the South was. So I would make work about like these stories, and she would tell me these just all kinds of crazy stories. Just her having fights and her driving on this highway which was called 165, and she said it's a highway 165, and she said that the police pulled her over, and she's a black woman driving in the South, and she said the officer said, "Did you see that sign back there? You're speeding." And she said, "Officer, I was trying to do 165." and she had been drinking and all of this stuff, and the officer let her go. So, because he was just tickled by what she said. So that was always her. So I was making this work right here was a piece that she was telling me about her and her sister dating brothers. So I would make work just trying to understand myself through those stories that she was telling. I would always sit down with her and just listen to her talk and just laugh. A little bit after that, I was getting ready to, I decided to go to grad school in 2005. And during the time I got there, there's a lot of things that was happening. But when I got there, I was reading this book called Our Kind of People, and it's a TV series about it now. But I started thinking about class, and how a lot of our communities are shaped by class. And I was thinking about like even myself in high school, because I went to a majority black high school, and how even the way we navigated those spaces was also based on class. I was a kid that had grew up in the projects, but we moved from out of the projects, and we moved in a working class community. But the school I was at was like kind of divided between those kids, the have and the have-nots. And but I was like always the kid that could navigate both spaces, and I was friends with all of the guys at the school or whatever. So I started making this work based on that. Coming from Louisiana, where the paper bag test was a big part of the culture, and a lot of people didn't know about if they didn't come from the black community. But the paper bag test was also a way that communities were organized. If you couldn't pass a paper bag test, you couldn't be a part of certain social groups, and that also predicted how you lived, right? So I was making work about just class and history and culture and all these things just with this work. Eventually in grad school, I started thinking more and more about what I was doing with my work and who I was and what I was drawn to. I was a kid that grew up with hip hop from the beginning, and I really was drawn to characters like these guys because I grew up with these characters. The gold teeth and all of that stuff was always like just an everyday thing before it became like this pop culture thing. So in school, I started making these because I was in grad school to do printmaking. I was making these pieces based on the grill series, and grills were real popular in the 2000s. And but it was something that I had always lived with, like I said. So I started trying to understand the history of grills. And the first guy on the end is Joe Johnson, the boxer. Jack Johnson, my bad. Joe Johnson, the basketball player. Jack Johnson was the world champion in the early 20th century, around 1909 or 1906 or something like that. But he had gold teeth in his mouth, and I thought about like the parallels between like him and like modern day athletes. And then me learning that gold teeth were also in different cultures, I wanted to kind of like, I just was playing around with how these things were kind of linked to other groups. I think I'm going over too long. But I also was reading about how gold teeth were also a way that black folks, because black folks couldn't put their money in banks, the gold teeth were a way that they could put their money in their mouth. So that whole saying, you put your money where your mouth is, was really like interesting in that sense. So I started. Gangsta Grills was also a mixtape series from the hip hop that's still kind of around now, but I made this work around that. Also at that time, I was starting to really think about like, how do I make this connection between the old and the new in my work? And I was looking at people like Barclay Hendricks, Kara James Marshall, Micheline Thomas, and Kahinde, which is also linked to Barclay Hendricks. And I started thinking about like, how do I really want to make this connection between those two things. So I thought about like things that my mom would say, like, you kids aren't like it how it used to be. And I kind of beg to differ. And then listening to your auntie, your mom never gonna tell you like the true story. Your auntie, her cousin, those are the people that usually tell you, your mom used to, she used to dance all night. She used to smoke and drink just like the rest of us. And so it just made me think about like this full circle of how we kind of repeat these things in life. So around 2005, Katrina happened, and for me, it takes me a little time to process things when things happen. And I remember watching the news and looking at the stories of what was going on in New Orleans and the way they were talking about the people as refugees versus being like just American citizens. And one of my friends, who he went back as soon as they allowed people to go back, he went back and he started. He was telling me about some of the blogs that they started, and the blogs were set up for people that were in New Orleans to talk. People that were in New Orleans and people that had left, for them to talk about what was going on. And he was saying that a lot of the blogs was just flat out racist, like people just ranting about racist stuff. So for me, I started to think about like how the flood waters kind of came in and washed away lines, like where people live. So people from the 9th ward were living in the 6th ward, and it was and that kind of disrupted, like, even like, when you think about crime, it also disrupted the type of crime, like things that people did. So if people relied on selling drugs, that also disrupted the way they sold drugs. And at one time, it was like order to even this thing, right, that we look at from the outside looking in, and we like, this is bad. But it's also like, this is the way people survive when they don't have resources. So I started making work about just thinking about all of those things. How do I make the old connect to the new? How do I talk about class and how Katrina erased lines when it came to class, and how all black folk, no matter if you had money or not, we all had to deal with the shit that was going on all the same. So this piece is a lot of collage. This is like when I first started like really thinking about collage layering. I'm using the Xeroxes and printing on paper bags and painting on paper and doing all that layering. So the work is also about onions and this ideal of the onion, unraveling an onion, that things that exist now happen because of things that happened in the past, and how those things in the past continue to affect how we navigate the world even today. So I was thinking about like, how do I create this Southern style of work, thinking about who I think I am, who the world perceives me to be, being from the South, being black. I started thinking about like I was thinking about wallpaper and how using the wallpaper as this place to say something without it being directly in your face, but still conveying something. And thinking about like how even that kind of connected to even contemporary culture, which this is like graffiti when guys do the throw ups, and the quick throw ups are like not paste ups, which are quick graffiti pieces. And so I started making that connection in my own personal work, using magazines to create backgrounds, and using the paint to interact with those backgrounds, and painting on paper with the figures to kind of make that connection between something more contemporary. And using figures for me also is important because art is not always accessible to everybody, but the figure is an accessible object for everybody, no matter if it's a negative thing or a positive thing. But I always say this in my talks, it's important that my cousin Pookie can come to the show and also identify with something in the work. I don't want it to be too theory heavy where it's just kind of like my mom or anybody else can't get it. So I want them to have access to the work too. So the work that I started making was Slim Crowism. And Slim Crowism for me was this connection between how the Jim Crow had affected modern culture, but through this hip hop lens. So I started making this work called Slim Crowism, and then Slim being a hip hop word, and it also existed during Black exploitation, and it also existed during the blues. This is the way that people describe certain people, and sometimes Slim didn't even matter if they was slim built; it was still you was slim. So I started really expanding on that work. This piece is called Tribe Life. And it's about like making connections between the Tupac's thug life idea and like how that street culture is even tribal in ways. This is more work that I started a little bit after grad school. I was working on just thinking about how derogatory terms started to become like regular terms and is used in hip hop. So I was playing around with that with these mugshots that I was doing. So these are works from the mugshot series, and it has Goons, and that one has Savage, which you can see his record was called Savage Life, and he's also from Louisiana. So a lot of the work is for me. I was thinking about like myself being this outlet for, I guess, my other personality. One to be a hip hop guy, one to maybe be a rapper and get in front of people, but not having the personality to do that. So my work is kind of that extension. I get to use hip hop themes and kind of play with that to say bigger things. So this was another piece using some of the mug shots, but also playing around with some hip hop terminology. And then these are influences that from college, actually, when I started like taking graphic design classes and being interested in hip hop. I really was drawn to the whole pen and pixel movement and the way that they designed it. They designed album covers, and when you look at my work, you can see those influences in the work. And for a while, I didn't really pay attention to how it was in the work, but so all of these pieces kind of playing this. And this one is the foam cut print and the dress, which is stuff that we'll be playing around with in class. This is a large piece, and I told my class today about the fence on this piece right here. That was yesterday. I talked about the fence on this piece. It took me 3 days to do the fence, to cut the fence, and I made a mistake and threw the print away. I'm still sad about that. But this piece will be in a show in Nashville coming up in September. And it's real big pieces. So this goes into my Go Everything piece, which is new work that I started in 2019. This is one of the pieces I started here, actually. And it's about like the history of portraiture and who got to participate in the history of portraiture, but inserting black bodies in that history, and even playing around with the faux frames, which was those are canvas. The frames are all canvas. So, and it's a little if you look at them real close, you can see like they also have like designs to kind of mimic the whole gold frame. Gold frames, but just thinking about the whole history of how gold was used in like even the Byzantine period and the shapes and designs, but also thinking about the long history, because the Byzantine period, it usually gets credit for it, but a lot of cultures were using gold in all kinds of ways way before. More of the my bling bling hip hop fantasies. I guess fantasies. I want to be a Cash Money millionaire at one time. But these are more of the pieces playing around with the fake gold frames. So this is another group of works that's kind of within the goal, everything, but it's kind of like complete different, opposite. This is Master P, White Ice Cream Man. So I started making these pieces called Ice Cream Man, but using the ideal of the Ice Cream Man as more of this guy right here being like the target of white aggression, white fragility, white anxiety, but and also being the target of culture, like being, this is the guy, the cool guy. When we think about somebody that's cool, and this is all collage. The background is ads I also added pearl paint to these paintings, so it kind of connects to the car culture also because of the pearl paint jobs that they put on cars. And this is my my full circle. In 2018, we started this group called the Black Creatives Circle of North Louisiana to address the same issues that we were addressing in Memphis, that I was trying to help address in Memphis. And the group is just a platform to give creatives in the area a place to be, a safe space to talk about art, to create their own thing, and a platform for them to do things that they've dreamed of. So again, me collaging people, putting people together to create something. And then what we've done all kinds of stuff. We do meetups, which is at the far left. We've had an exhibition. We do community work, and yeah, we've done all kinds of things just in the last five years. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thanks, Vitus. We'll do a few questions. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and for either Lan or Vitus, and I'll run the mic to you.
Thank you both for your talk. Lan, this one is for you. I think like hearing your talk and hearing about your practice and how long things take, I'm thinking so much about slowness. And I guess I'm wondering, what does it mean to have a very slow practice in a very fast art world? Because you're asking to add a whole step, because it's like, it's not just meaning and making at this point, it's also matter. So
Right.
what do you do?
Wow, what a great question. I don't even know if I know the answer to that. I have to reveal to you that I actually don't make that much art. I don't make art when I don't have a compulsion to do it. I do it when the idea is there. I'm a sculptor, so once you make an artwork, it's like it lives with you in space. So I don't feel the need to actually make work. I don't have that. I don't put that demand on myself. And I'm actually extremely lazy, so you better hold those ideas and make sure they're solid before you make them, because it means that you have a 9-to-5 going on, But that's an interesting question. It's about slowness. I think maybe that's possibly why I thought about duration and time and how something like sculpture could take on time. The other thing, too, is I used to be a photographer. And so I really thought about that freezing of time, that kind of capture. Photography is very different. It's a record. And so I started to realize sculpture doesn't work like that. Sculpture is not a record. And even though it's the material evidence of a thing, it never plays itself. Isn't that strange? And so material always stands for something else. And so I kind of misused my photographic compulsion onto sculpture. When the sculpture play itself? When can it be material evidence? And so I kind of answer that question. So I don't know if, I think it matters to think about time because there's pressures about it, but that goes into other life decisions about how you want to make art. I don't think I wanted to turn it into a job, so take time.
Hi, Lan. I'm right over here. Your stories made me chuckle because I'm also Filipino. And I did the whole thing of like when you're pregnant, you step over your sleeping husband to give them your morning sickness. And I did that for all 3 pregnancies. So I love what you're doing with your work. I applaud you, especially as somebody who's Filipino and Southeast Asian. A lot of our trash and a lot of our stuff that we think are recycling is now being burnt in the backyards of families, and now they're experiencing cancer and high rates of birth defects in those Southeast Asian countries. So one of the things that I remember also about our culture that we share is before colonization and everything else like that, we ate off of banana leaves. We used our hands to feed ourselves, very Kamayan style. And so I think also with that practice, do you ever think about the juxtaposition of how natives or, the savages were taking only what they needed from the land and using things that, were thought as poor, but now the modern stuff is now making us more toxic.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, there are so many grants out there for artists who want to work with scientists, and there are scientists in the Philippines that have made biodegradable plastics from like the fatty acids of coconuts. And so I don't know if you'd ever juxtapose any of that work, whether it's like the native part where the things that you take from the land are biodegradable, or possibly working with scientists.
Thanks for that question. That's pretty thorough. Yeah, I think about that. And in a way, some of the ways that I think about our relationship to material is we do have to recuperate certain practices that work perfectly fine. Like if you visit Pompeii, take a look at their wood floor. Take a look at the way they designed flooring. It was a way of heating and cooling that was perfectly fine. And you did not need certain apparatuses of like air conditioners and heating and stuff just by the way you build something. I want to reveal something to you guys. There has been no lack of great human, creative, brilliant engineering ideas. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's something called the power structure that decides which ideas that we will live by. So a lot of habits that we learned are learned because they have become available to us and certain realities have been suppressed. And so most of the things I'm definitely interested in about is the way in which power structures absolutely influence which version of reality we are going to learn. And so, of course, most of those ideas come from indigenous cultures, small cultures, developed culture, you name it. There is no lack of ideas. And actually, we don't even need to separate who came up with it first, because we kind of have to recognize that we exist in a kind of capitalist ideology, and that will affect what kinds of things will become available to us. So I think that's my answer to that. There is no lack. And the reason why I wouldn't present like native culture because I actually don't want to create that separation. I don't want to be this, that, or another. It's all integrated and it all impacts each other, right? So I don't want to separate those things. Some of the older works I did was like, yeah, if I want to see Filipino culture in the museum, I'm in the past tense. We never get to be contemporary, you know? You ever think about that? So, and then people see my work, they're like, I don't see any stuff from your culture. I'm like, because I'm I would like to exist in the same time frame as you are, you know, like, so something to think about. Anyway, then the next question that you ask, yeah, there is a lot, and also that's something to be careful of too, right? Because where the money is coming from in terms of those collaborations between scientists and artists, it's going to be you're going to have to pay attention to how they want to instrumentalize those collaborations, how they operate in terms of marketing. Is it greenwashing? But at the same time, I just try to solve my own problems. You know, I'm an artist. I make things. It costs money. I have to use my own lifespan to make money and then use that to like buy art. So some of the problems that I'm trying to solve are actually immediate to me, and I think that's an honest way to begin. So when I go to the studio and you're like, really? You need a 4x8 sheet of plywood? That costs $48.99. Is there not another way around this? And so you get to the whole system when you kind of approach it from your immediate problem. I hope that answered the question.
I'm just a mic holder, so each time I'll make sure I pass it back to you. No problem, I got your back.
Hi, Vitus. This question is for you.
Well, you did a good job. That's why I didn't have any questions.
Nice. I'm interested in how you embark on a series, and I'm really interested in how you move from one series to another. And I'm curious how that works in your studio. Do you work on a series at a time, or are you kind of working on a few?
Yeah, I do. I work on I do work on like multiple pieces all at the same time, but like a lot of times it's like I'm listening to, like I listen. My students, they showed me this the other, like last, what quarter that was, the winter quarter. They showed me that you can look at your Spotify playlist, like how many people you listen to, and last year I listened to 40,000 like artists. Cause I'm always listening to hip hop and new artists and new whatever come out new this week, that week. So, and that always influences like something. Like, so I'm listening to the music and this certain thing is said, and I'm like, yo, this kind of connects to something else larger that we might not think about. So like right now in the back of my head, it's one of those things that I've been processing for maybe like a couple years now, but I've been thinking about this platinum football field series of works that I want to do, and I'm getting ready to start that. And that work is about, it comes from the Big Timer song, Number One Stunners, and at the end, Baby is like talking about he just bought himself a brand new platinum football field. But for me, and we know that that's not real, but for me, it made me start thinking about the history of highways in this country, and how highways were used to also cut off ownership in black communities. But also he's talking about purchasing these things that are like kind of like out of this world, like and like how this whole ideal of the American dream, really, that's what they're rapping about. When we're listening to the rappers rapping about like these nice cars and these clothes. This is the American dream, and for most of us that's 30 and plus, we grew up during watching Dallas, right, the TV show, and Dallas was like this over the top version of what it was to own things in America, right? So, of course, and then also you remember a lot of the artists, the rappers and stuff were being friends with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was also this idea of a person that owned a lot of big and gaudy things. And it was, but then like, you know, so many of them look back and now like, okay, I maybe shouldn't have said that or hung out with him or whatever. But yeah, that's what kind of like when I'm listening to music, these things start to like, I'll connect to something else that I'm not always, initially it's not always there, but it just kind of starts to happen. And I think like, because I am a person that think about like also when you're thinking about like, you're talking about who has access to things, and who also has like these connections to like, like in philosophies, right? We don't think about the guy that's smoking a cigarette that's fixing your car as this genius, right? We don't think about that class of people also being able to give you some deeper philosophied kind of conversations. But when you're in the barbershop, you get that stuff as a black kid. So I think, like, for me, it's also me thinking about those kind of like things, power structures that too, like, and also thinking about like the rappers as these people that are philosophizing, but I think a lot of times because rap music, black culture is disposable, we don't make those connections. Like now we could, a record could be top 100 and then within weeks you never hear from that artist again. And that's just because it's that the culture is so disposable. So
It was like Antonio Gramsci said, everyone is an intellectual.
right. And that's how I think about it. So
I have one more for Vitus. I'm really curious. You talk so much about hip hop, and there's such like tenderness in how you talk about it that I wonder if you ever think about, because your paintings and collages have such a visual representation of hip hop as a culture. I'm so curious. Like, do we ever, as an audience, get insight to the playlist? Like, you know what I mean? Like, part of me is just like, oh, I would love to see these paintings in an exhibition that is exclusively playing your Spotify playlist.
Yeah, so a couple of my exhibitions have been like the Bout It show that was in New Orleans and it's traveled to North Carolina. We put together a playlist for it. So, and my playlist was from old school like Snoop and NWA all the way back to like Wayne and NBA YoungBoy and all of that stuff. So I listen to a wide array of hip hop music when I listen, and then like sometimes I even got to go back and freshen up on things I used to listen to as a kid. So yeah, I can shoot you some playlists. I got I do have like I got a mixtape Wayne playlist, which is like the that 2005 and all of that Wayne when he was like just doing all the mixtapes and features and all that stuff. And so I got some playlists. But I also got like some Talib Kweli and some Mos Def and Common and some I listen to a whole wide range. But I feel like all of this stuff is connected, right? And I think it's just like I don't know. I just feel like these things outside kind of control how we connect, and I try to make those connections in my work, and I think it's just important for me. I don't know.
All right, thank you both so much.